You are condemned to be free, and in that lies your most terrifying responsibility. Jean-Paul Sartre. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. The moment you lose all crutches, the world falls silent. No rules to follow, no orders to obey, no hand to guide you, just you. And the terrifying space of possibility. It doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like exile. When the chains are gone, there's nothing left to blame. And that's when the real horror begins. The horror of facing yourself, not the reflection you've carefully maintained, but the raw creature beneath the masks. The one that can no longer pretend. The one that finally realizes every step forward is yours. Every fall, every wound, every scar, also yours. Jean-Paul Sartre didn't speak of freedom as a gift. He spoke of it as a sentence that begins the moment you're no longer held by anything, when nothing has meaning unless you give it meaning. And when giving meaning means choosing, again and again, in a world that couldn't care less. Most people don't want this kind of freedom. They say they do, but what they crave is comfort, not responsibility. They want choices without consequences, identity without effort, a path without pain. But freedom doesn't come in soft shapes. It comes like a knife. A knife doesn't tell you what to do, it just waits. You can carve truth out of yourself with it, or you can bleed. That is the unbearable clarity of real freedom. There is no path unless you make it, and once you see this, you can never unsee it. To be free means to be condemned, to be the sculptor and the stone, to hold the hammer and the wound. There's no going back, no one else to carry the weight, and this is where many break, not because they're weak, but because no one told them what freedom demands. It demands your illusions, it demands your certainty, it demands your death, the death of the person you were when you still believed someone else was in control. So when you finally step into the open field of existence, naked and without excuses, you will feel it, the crushing, brilliant, brutal burden of your own being. And from that point on, the only way forward is through the fire. That fire is your freedom. Most people spend their lives hiding from themselves. They think they're hiding from the world, from judgment, from failure. But in truth, they are hiding from their own freedom. Real freedom is not granted. It's not a right and not a reward. It's a confrontation with your own mind, with your own history, with the parts of you that were never ready to grow up. The child inside wants to dream, wants to be taken care of, wants to believe someone knows better, that someone else holds the plan, the answer, the map. But the map doesn't exist. And the deeper truth is, no one is coming. That's what breaks people, not tragedy, not pain, but the moment they see no one is in charge. And so they run. They escape into systems, into beliefs that soothe, into jobs that provide a script, into relationships where someone else can take the lead, into masks of control, perfection, morality, rebellion, anything to avoid the abyss of choice. Freedom feels too sharp, too open, too raw. It doesn't embrace you, it strips you. It rips off the safety of identity. It says, you are responsible for everything, and if you fail, the universe will not stop spinning. There will be no divine hand, no voice from the sky, no applause or punishment, just silence, and your own reflection. That silence is unbearable to most, so they fill it with noise, opinions, obligations, borrowed dreams, anything not to hear the echo of emptiness that freedom carries. But it's not emptiness, it's space, and that space is sacred. In it, you can finally breathe without pretending. You can move without performing. You can choose, not because someone told you to, but because something inside you burned too long in silence. Still, few enter that space, because it hurts. It burns through the false self like acid. It confronts every excuse, every lie, every story that said, "I can't." Freedom says, "You can, but will you?" And that, "will you?" it changes everything. Because now the mirror isn't just showing you your face, it's showing you your cowardice, your laziness, your hunger for approval, your need to blame. And suddenly you see, the real prison wasn't out there. It was built inside you, by you. When you believe you are not free, the pain feels lighter, because then, at least, you can say it wasn't your fault. You can suffer as a victim. But when you accept your freedom, the suffering becomes holy, because now it has direction, it has meaning, it is yours. The ego collapses under that truth. It cannot carry such weight. It was designed to survive, not to awaken, to obey, not to create. That's why freedom is poison to the fragile ego. It shatters the walls it built to protect itself. It exposes the lie that safety and life are the same. They are not. Safety is comfort. Life is risk. And freedom is the permission to risk everything, even yourself, in pursuit of what is real. The most dangerous lie is the one that looks like freedom. The one wrapped in choice, painted with color, sold through screens and trends. The lie that whispers, "You are in control," while every move you make is guided by hands you'll never see. Systems have grown smarter than chains. They no longer hold you down. They keep you entertained. They no longer forbid. They distract. They don't need to command. They only need to offer pleasure, offer options, offer 1,000 ways to never meet yourself. And so begins the quiet death, not of the body, but of the soul. You think you're choosing, but you're reacting to algorithms, to patterns, to stories injected into your mind before you could even speak. You're not living, you're being lived. Look at the world built around you. It doesn't ask who you are, it tells you who to be. And if you follow, you are rewarded with likes, promotions, comfort, surface peace. But if you turn away, if you dare to question, to refuse, to step into the unknown, you are punished with silence, with isolation, with the terrifying echo of your own thoughts. The architecture of manipulation is no longer brutal. It is beautiful. It seduces. It sings lullabies. And while you sleep, it feeds on your will. That is why breaking free feels like violence, because it is. To reclaim your freedom is to wage war on everything that has ever held you, not just on society, but on the small, obedient parts of you that wanted to belong, that wanted to be good, that wanted to be loved for compliance. But there is no freedom in being good. There is no liberation in being liked. The price of freedom is the death of who you were trained to be. And in that death, everything erupts. The shadows rise. The hidden voices scream. The old self clings and claws. You begin to doubt. You begin to shake. The ground beneath your beliefs begins to crack. What you thought was truth dissolves. What you thought was you collapses. You are now in the fire. And this fire does not end quickly. It burns through identity, through illusion, through comfort, through all the ideas that once held you safe. You lose people. You lose dreams. You lose the certainty that once helped you sleep. But in that losing, something ancient awakens. A force that has no name. A will that doesn't need reason. A clarity beyond thought. It's not ego. It's not personality. It's power. Raw, silent, unmoving. And when it rises, it doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about approval. It doesn't need to explain itself, because it was never born from the world. It was born from truth. You walk differently now, not with pride, but with presence. You stop chasing. You stop apologizing. You stop explaining your path to those who cannot see it. You no longer bend to avoid rejection, because you have already rejected the lie. The lie that said you had to be someone else to be loved. The lie that said you were too much or not enough. The lie that said you had to earn your worth. You burn the scripts. You throw away the masks. You bury the polite version of yourself. And you become terrifying. Not because you threaten, but because you cannot be moved. Because you no longer fit in cages. Because your silence now speaks louder than their noise. People won't understand. They're not supposed to. Your freedom isn't for their comfort. It's for your becoming. And that becoming, it will cost you everything you thought you needed, everything you thought you were, everything you clung to when you were still asleep. But in return, it gives you something else, something the world can't sell, something no system can steal. It gives you yourself. Not the self shaped by mirrors, roles, or fears, but the one that stood at the edge of the abyss and didn't run. The one that stayed when the fire came. The one that rose without asking. The one that chose truth over belonging, soul over safety, life over survival. That self is not a role, it's a force. And once it is born, it never dies. It can be silenced, buried, ignored, but never broken, because it has tasted what it means to be free. And that taste, once known, poisons everything false. Freedom does not roar, it whispers. Not in the moments of victory, but in the silence that follows. Collapse. When the applause fades, when the masks fall, when the world turns away, and you are left alone with your own soul, that's where real freedom begins. It is not built in noise, it is built in absence. The absence of need, of pretending, of belonging to anything that makes you smaller than the force living inside you. And for many, this is unbearable, because to live without crutches, without labels, without shields, means to stand naked before life itself. Most would rather bleed than be that exposed. They would rather suffer predictably than taste the wild uncertainty of a life that belongs only to them. Because freedom is not comfortable. It doesn't protect. It doesn't guarantee love, success, safety, or meaning. It only offers the raw, burning possibility of truth, and truth does not bend to your desires. It either devours you or sets you free. The world is terrified of people who cannot be controlled. That's why it builds 1,000 traps. Some are made of fear, some of praise, some of love, some of silence. All with the same purpose, to make you forget that you are already free. But when that truth returns to you, when it rises through your brokenness and stands behind your eyes, nothing can touch you, not because you're stronger, but because you no longer need to win. The free soul no longer fears defeat, because defeat is a concept for those still playing a game. And you have left the game. You have walked off the field, thrown away the rules, and decided that you will no longer fight for a place in a world that asks you to shrink. You will no longer negotiate with your own voice. There is a moment, quiet, brutal, final, when you stop asking for permission, not from the world, not from your parents, not from your culture, your past, your guilt, or your fear. And in that moment, you don't become someone else. You finally return to who you were before the world told you who to be. And that version of you is not soft. It's wild, untamed, inconvenient, fierce, because it remembers what the world forgot, that to live is not to perform, it is to burn. Burn through illusion, burn through obedience, burn through every version of yourself you created to survive, until nothing remains but truth. And truth is not a concept. It is a vibration. It is the feeling that rises in your chest when you speak without trembling, when you walk without explaining, when you breathe without needing approval. It is the way your eyes stop apologizing. It is the way your body stops shrinking. It is the way your presence begins to disrupt every room you enter, simply because it cannot be contained. You no longer echo, you radiate. And that radiance, it does not beg to be understood. It does not explain its path. It simply exists, and in its existence it threatens every lie still clung to by those who refuse the fire. They will call you arrogant. They will call you selfish, intense, unstable, dangerous. But they are not speaking to you. They are speaking to the part of themselves that wants to be free and hates that you dared. So you must walk alone, not in sorrow, but in peace. Because freedom is not about breaking chains. It's about never letting them touch you again. It's about reaching the place where no one can take anything from you, because you have already given it all up. You have faced the loss. You have swallowed the fear. You have watched the false self die, and you did not flinch. This is the real resurrection, not into light, but into presence. You are no longer chasing wholeness. You are wholeness. You are no longer trying to be enough. You are. Not for them, not for the world, but for the quiet flame inside you, the one that never left. It waited, through your pretending, through your compliance, through your doubt and shame and noise. It waited because it knew. It knew that one day you would break, and not break down, but break open. That the weight of your freedom would crush the false self, and what would remain would be the truth. A truth that does not shout, a truth that does not convince, a truth that simply stands. And when you stand in that truth, you are unshakable. You are not the storm. You are the stillness inside it. You are not the fire. You are the source from which it burns. And from that place, you don't need the world to understand you. You don't need love to be earned. You don't need life to make sense. You are the meaning. You are the flame. You are the freedom they forgot they once were. There comes a moment when you stop waiting for yourself. You no longer search for a sign, for validation, for the final proof that you're allowed to begin. You simply begin. You rise, not because someone opened the door, but because the silence inside you became louder than all the voices outside. This is the moment when freedom becomes flesh, when it leaves the realm of philosophy and enters your blood, your breath, your bones. It is no longer an idea. It is a force, one that moves without asking, one that doesn't bend to fear. And you will lose people, not because you push them away, but because your silence became unbearable for their noise. Your stillness became unbearable for their chaos. Your truth became a mirror they weren't ready to look into. That is the price of freedom. You outgrow everything that required your smallness to survive. You lose the friends who needed your agreement. You lose the lovers who fed on your doubt. You lose the dreams that were built on someone else's vision. But in that losing, something else begins. You begin. Not the version they molded, not the face you wore to be accepted, but the raw, sacred, grounded force that never needed to explain itself. And when that begins, you return to your center. You begin to see clearly, not with your eyes, but with your being. You feel it in your gut when something is false. You feel it in your chest when something no longer belongs. And without rage, without apology, you let it go. You walk away, not because you hate, but because you are finished pretending. This is not rebellion. It is remembrance of who you were before the world told you what to be, of what you carried before you were taught to carry everyone else, of the way your soul moved before you learned to walk in straight lines. Freedom is not a war. It is a return to essence, to presence, to the rhythm of your own truth. And the more you return, the more you burn, not in destruction, but in purification. The fire inside you begins to touch everything. Every thought, every choice, every movement is passed through it. And what cannot stand in that fire, you leave behind. The fake smiles, the shallow talk, the empty goals, the roles you used to play so well. They melt. You no longer have the energy to perform. You no longer have the need to be understood. You no longer crave recognition because you have seen what lies beyond it all. The raw truth of being alive with no one to please and nothing to prove. That is where power is born, not the power to control others, but the power to no longer be controlled. Not the power to be above, but the power to be untouched. Not the power to dominate, but the power to remain, in silence, in chaos, in truth. And this truth, it is never loud. It does not argue. It does not justify. It does not explain. It simply is. And when you become it, you stop seeking, not because you have all the answers, but because you are finally willing to live without them. You are finally willing to live in the unknown, to breathe in the dark, to walk without direction and still move with purpose. The world may call this madness, but the world has forgotten what it means to be alive. It worships control. It worships logic, routine, conformity. It calls this order, but it is only a cage, painted gold, and freedom shatters it. Not with violence, not with noise, but with presence, with the quiet decision to no longer betray yourself, to no longer lie, to no longer shrink. That is revolution, not in streets, in souls. One soul that dares to live freely is more dangerous than a million shouting from behind masks, because that one soul, awakened, grounded, unapologetic, becomes a mirror too clear to ignore. And mirrors, real ones, burn. They show what's hidden. They reveal what's been buried. They reflect what's been denied. That is why your freedom will not make you popular. It will not make you safe. It will not make you comfortable. But it will make you true. And in that truth, you will taste something deeper than peace, something more ancient than joy. You will feel the quiet song of your own being humming below the noise of the world. You will no longer ask what your purpose is. You will no longer search for meaning, because your life itself, your presence, your silence, your steps will become meaning. Not because the world says so, but because you say so. That is the final liberation, when you no longer ask the world to see you, because you have seen yourself, and it was enough. You will not return the same. Once the fire has passed through you, once the lies have turned to ash, once the old self has fallen away like dead skin, you will walk differently. Not faster, not louder, but deeper. You will move like someone who no longer owes the world an explanation, because you have died. And in that death, you were reborn, not as something new, but as something ancient that had been waiting beneath your surface all along. This is the truth of transformation. It does not give you wings, it gives you roots. Not to stay in one place, but to move with purpose, to know without knowing how, to stand even when the ground is shaking, to listen even when silence is the only sound left. Freedom is not a high, it is a gravity. It pulls you inward. It deepens your tone. It sharpens your eyes. It grounds your presence. And from that grounding, everything changes. Your relationships shift. You no longer play roles. You no longer perform connection. You speak less and say more, because your words now carry the weight of someone who has faced themselves. You no longer chase love. You no longer chase recognition. You no longer chase anything. Because you are no longer running from yourself. That running was the addiction, the constant reaching, the hunger to be filled by something outside you. But now, you are full, not of certainty, but of space. You have made room for grief, room for truth, room for the quiet voice that only speaks when all others fall silent. That voice is not dramatic. It doesn't scream. It doesn't command. It simply says, "You are here. You have always been here, and nothing outside of you is needed to complete you." This is not ego. This is presence. It has no face, no name, but it moves through you like a river that forgot it was ever frozen. And from here, life begins again. But it is not the life you imagined. It is not the one filled with accolades or applause. It is not the one where everything goes right. It is not clean. It is not safe. It is not perfect. It is real. It breathes. It bleeds. It breaks. But now you meet it differently. You no longer resist the breaking. You no longer curse the wound, because you understand that pain is part of freedom too, not as punishment, but as reminder. Reminder that you are alive. Reminder that you are open. Reminder that you are no longer protecting yourself from life. You are participating in it. You have returned, not as a role, not as a product, but as a presence. And in that return, the world will no longer feel the same. It will feel louder, stranger, sometimes emptier, because now you can see, you can feel what others numb, you can hear what others drown, you can hold what others drop. And this can hurt, because you still walk among them, you still hear the noise, you still see the masks, but you no longer wear one. And so sometimes you will feel alone, not because you are lost, but because you are found in a world that fears remembering itself. You will feel the grief of awakening, the sorrow of watching others cling to chains, the ache of knowing you cannot make them see, that they must choose it, that they must burn, that they must die, as you did. And some won't. Some will curse you. Some will call you broken. Some will call you dangerous. Some will call you mad. But that is not your burden. Your only task now is to live true, to stay close to your flame, to honor the fire that made you. And that fire, it will test you. It will ask you again and again. Will you betray yourself for comfort? Will you shrink to be loved? Will you lie to be accepted? Will you wear the mask one more time? And you must answer with your life, not with words, not with promises, but with presence, with choices, with silence when silence is truth, with movement when stillness would be easier, with leaving when staying means self-betrayal. You will lose much, but you will gain yourself. And that self, once found, is not something you hold. It is something you become. A living question turned into a breathing answer, a silent force that no longer waits to be seen. It walks, it breathes, it burns. And the world begins to shift, not because you changed it, but because you stopped changing yourself to fit inside it. You are no longer adjusting, you are no longer dimming, you are no longer explaining. You have become the flame. Freedom is not a straight road. It bends, it breaks, it circles back on itself. At times it feels like progress, at times like madness. There are days when everything feels clear, sharp, aligned, and then days when nothing makes sense. This is not failure. It's the nature of awakening. The deeper you go, the more layers you uncover, and each layer demands a new kind of honesty. You begin to see that even after all the masks have fallen, there are still subtle ways you try to control the narrative. Ways you try to look right, sound wise, stay untouchable. Freedom strips even that. It asks you to be seen not as an image of strength, but in your full humanity. Flawed, changing, uncertain. Because real strength doesn't come from the image you project. It comes from the truth you carry, even when it's inconvenient, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Many people will admire your fire from a distance, but few will understand the cost, the loss of illusions, the loneliness of no longer belonging, the weight of standing fully in your choices. To be free is not to be light. It's to carry the full responsibility of your existence without handing it to anyone else, without hiding behind trauma, history, or circumstance, without playing victim or hero. This level of ownership can feel brutal. You stop blaming, you stop escaping, you stop pretending that life is happening to you. Everything becomes a mirror, your relationships, your pain, your patterns, and each reflection invites you to go deeper, to take one more step out of the old structure and into your raw, unwritten truth. But that truth does not always feel empowering. Sometimes it feels heavy, sometimes it isolates you, because to no longer belong to the collective illusions means walking a quieter road. You are no longer easily understood. You speak a language that only those who have burned like you can hear, and even then, the connection is rare. Yet, in that rarity, something sacred is born, a quiet integrity, a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a clarity that doesn't shout but steadies your entire being. You no longer look for someone to follow, you no longer need a path, because now your life becomes the path. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every time you say no, when it would be easier to say yes, all of it carves the shape of your inner freedom. This kind of life doesn't seek glory. It doesn't seek revenge for the years spent asleep. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply continues. Grounded, steady, undeniably alive. Freedom does not arrive with celebration. It arrives quietly, like dusk settling across the bones of the day. After everything has fallen, after everything has burned, after the noise, the striving, the masks, only then does freedom begin to speak. And what it says is not sweet. It is not comforting. It is not what you expected. It is not what they promised. Freedom says, now you are alone with yourself. No more stories, no more performances, no more roles to play. You wanted truth. Here it is. You are the source. You are the cause. You are the shape and the fire. And there is no one left to blame. No one left to save you. No one left to explain what comes next. This is the moment where many collapse, because it is easier to carry chains than to carry full responsibility. Easier to obey than to create. Easier to suffer than to choose. The old structures, even when they strangled you, gave you purpose. They gave you something to fight, something to reject. But now that you are free, what do you fight? What do you resist? What do you cling to? Nothing. There is no enemy left, only the vast, unshaped possibility of your own life. And this is where the real burden begins. Not the burden of oppression, but the burden of creation, the burden of self-honesty, the burden of integrity when no one is watching. You begin to feel what it means to truly walk alone, not because you are unloved, but because no one else can carry your truth. Freedom is not a shared state. It is not a collective agreement. It is an individual awakening, and most will not walk with you into that space, not because they are wrong, but because their path is still tangled in comfort, in fear, in the soft walls of who they think they are supposed to be. You do not blame them. You do not pity them. You simply see them. And in seeing them, you realize how invisible you once were to yourself. The version of you that played along, that fit in, that smiled and nodded, it was a ghost, a beautiful, functional, well-dressed ghost. You remember that ghost now, not with shame, but with compassion, because you needed that ghost. You needed to belong before you could outgrow the need. You needed the cage before you had the strength to break it. But the breaking came, and it was not gentle. It tore through your attachments. It shattered your images. It dismantled everything you once believed was you. And now, here you are, not healed, not perfect, not untouchable, but present, quietly, fiercely, deeply present, alive in a way you never thought possible. You no longer chase the future. You no longer edit the past. You inhabit this moment fully, with all its mess, its silence, its beauty, its sting. And from this place, something new begins to form. Not a new mask, not a new role, but a new rhythm, a way of moving through the world that is entirely your own. It is not easy to live like this. You will feel the weight of it, the weight of staying true in a world that rewards falsehood, the weight of choosing integrity over belonging, the weight of saying no when your body screams yes just to be accepted. But this weight is not suffering. It is clarity. It is the weight of no longer abandoning yourself. That is what freedom truly is. The end of self-abandonment. You may still fall. You may still ache. You may still crave the warmth of approval, but you no longer betray yourself to receive it. You stand, even when it cost you, even when it hurts, even when it would be so easy to return to the performance. Because now you have tasted something that cannot be undone. You have tasted what it means to belong to yourself, and that taste ruins everything that is not real. It ruins shallow talk. It ruins fake smiles. It ruins empty ambition. It ruins anything built on pretense, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. Your system simply rejects what does not align. And this rejection, it becomes your compass. You no longer move toward what looks good. You move toward what feels true. You no longer explain your choices. You no longer decorate your pain. You no longer dilute your joy to make others comfortable. You live. And that openness is not weakness. It is not softness. It is not compliance. It is strength. The kind of strength that cannot be bought or taught or stolen. The kind that rises from within. The kind that doesn't flinch in the face of loss. The kind that smiles in the face of uncertainty. The kind that keeps going, not because of motivation, but because there is no longer any other way. You are no longer chasing your life. You are living it. Every breath, every step, every silence becomes a declaration. I am here. I am real. I am free. And this freedom, it costs everything. But it gives you something that no system, no person, no ideology ever could. It gives you your soul back. Not as a concept, not as a belief, but as a lived reality. As a force that moves through your spine, your chest, your voice. You speak now from that place. You move from that place. You connect from that place. And the people who meet you there, few as they may be, will know. They will feel it. They will remember something in themselves that had gone quiet. Because your freedom reminds them of their own. Not with words, not with advice, but with presence. With the way you look at them. With the way you no longer need anything from them. With the way you simply are. This is how you begin to change the world. Not by trying to change it, but by no longer letting it change you. You become the proof that it is possible. To walk away. To begin again. To live without performing. To burn down every lie and still be standing. To be scarred and sacred at once. To be both wild and kind. To be both silent and full of fire. This is not the path of the many. It is the path of the real, and it never ends. Freedom is not a finish line, it is a practice, a constant remembering, a constant return to the self beneath the noise, a constant choice to stay true when it would be easier to disappear again. But once you've seen yourself, truly seen, you cannot unsee. And once you've walked in your own fire, you no longer fear the flames, because you are the flame. The world may never understand. That is not your concern. You are no longer here to be understood. You are here to be whole, to be true, to be alive, entirely, wildly, quietly alive. That is enough. That is everything. That is freedom. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.